Greetings, peace be with you. So in this video, you are going to discover some key points that you must be aware of before you go vegan. And if you are currently experimenting with the vegan diet, then you will understand how to truly maximize your eating habits so that you can have the energy, the vitality, and you can truly begin to maximize your nutrition. Now, this is not an anti-vegan video. This is not a pro-vegan video. A spiritual mentor of mine would say that there is no right or wrong at a higher level of awareness. Okay, there's only what works and what doesn't work given what it is that we intend to accomplish. Okay, if our desired end is to reach New York, then heading to LA is not morally incorrect. It is just something that doesn't work, right? In the same way, our objective over here, given that you are watching this video, is to function at the peak level of performance, to have elite levels of energy, vitality, and really maximize our ability for longevity, right? That is what we are here for. And how we can optimize our nutrition is a large part that plays into that bigger picture, right? Crazy insects over here. So I shared on a previous video my experiment with going on a plant-based diet. You can check it out. I didn't have a great experience with it, but the reasoning behind why I started down that path, these crows always be loving my videos. The reason I started down the path of a plant-based diet is because I moved to Bali, Indonesia, and over there's a huge spiritual community, and I connected with the spiritual community. I met so many people who were transitioning to a plant-based / vegan diet. And when I talk to them, like, yeah, like, you know, it's realizing that we're all one and having a part to play in the pain and suffering of another being is not something that they wanted to engage in. I was like, yeah, man, same here. I never really thought about what my food decisions were having an impact on other animals and stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna just go on a plant-based diet as well. Now, that was at a previous level of my journey. Now, at this point, okay, I didn't have a good experience with it. Okay, I talked about it in the previous video, but look, I know that it's a very noble cause to, like, you know, end the suffering of all beings and truly, like, begin to reduce the pain of all other beings, right? And that's amazing because that was my perception at the time as well. But then I came across the work of an interrogative specialist, right, by the name of Clev Baxter, I think his name is. He wrote a book called Primary Perception. Okay, very interesting stuff. So what Clev did over here is he brought in a plant, okay, and he hooked it up with a polygraph machine, aka a lie detector machine. And initially he thought that I'm just going to connect it and nothing's going to happen. It's just going to be flat. It's not going to pick up any electricity or any signal from the plant. But surprisingly enough, he found that it was picking up some electricity, and it was similar to what a human would exhibit on the polygraph machine as well. So that's pretty crazy, first and foremost. And then he furthered his experiments a bit, right? So what he did was he thought that, you know, let's see if I can ignite some stimulus over here and make the plant react. And what he did is he just thought about burning one of the plant's leaves. He didn't even do anything. He just thought about it. He was 5 meters away from the plant. He thought about it. I'm going to burn this plant's leaf. And crazily enough, the polygraph machine went crazy, like a stress response, right? That's insane. And he was obviously surprised as well. And then what he did is, okay, I'm going to go get the matches from my secretary's desk and I'm going to bring them. He brought them. It got even more crazy, right? The stress response got crazy. Then he lit the match and then it just went off the charts, right? The plant was exhibiting high levels of stress over there. That's crazy. Like, for me, when I read that first, I was like, okay, that's insane, right? And then the only way that plant was able to stop exhibiting that stress response is when he closed up the matches, put them back in his secretary's desk, and then it was back to a normal response. Okay, so we think that plants don't have an awareness, but as the experiments of this CIA interrogative specialist shows us, is that indeed they do have a stress response. Okay, so look, this is just understanding that without death there can be no life. Okay, in order for new life to come into being, there has to be the death of something else. Like, the cycle of death and birth are what we understand to be the two forces, right? Death is not the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. And once we can begin to understand that something must die in order for something else to have life, then we can understand that there is really no difference between sacrificing a plant and sacrificing an animal. Now, I know this can be a trigger point for a lot of vegans, but if you are in that situation, you're like, yo, no, plants don't have a nervous system, they don't feel pain, like, how dare you say this? Then I highly suggest you check out this book by Dr. Baxter, which is called Primary Perception, or check out this whole other book called The Secret Life of Plants, I believe it is, right? And that goes deep into these experiments on how plants themselves have an awareness. Yes, they don't have a brain, but they have a mind, right? We understand at a higher level that everything is connected to everything else, right? So what Dr. Baxter recommends over here, because at this point I'm not on a plant-based diet anymore. Like I said, I did not have exactly an amazing experience with it. I had some gut issues with it. And I do now consume animal products, and just at the end of the day, it comes down to what works for you. It's not right or wrong, okay? Because understand that Jesus Christ himself was also not a vegetarian. He was not a vegan, okay? While he was delivering his sermon on the mount, he was eating fish, and he gave fish to a lot of his followers as well. Okay, so this is not about morality anymore. This is about understanding what works, what doesn't work, given what it is that we are striving to accomplish, which is a high level of health, vitality, and energy, right? So given that, like, it's important to understand, nutrition science, because we're over here, we're figuring out what is the best nutrition for us, what is the best eating habits for us, and therefore it's important to dive deep into the research ourselves, right? Diving deep into the research is important, but it's also even more important not to get engaged with the content of a particular research paper and look at the context as well, okay? Is this a randomized clinical trial? Meaning, was it controlling for the placebo effect? Was it conducted on humans, or was it just conducted on a cell culture study or bacteria or something like that, right? Because if you're like me and you like diving deep into the research and scientific papers that are published on this, don't just think about, or don't just believe what you heard someone else quote from a scientific paper. Actually get to the core of it, look at it, look at who sponsored the study, how many people were engaged as subjects in this, was the placebo effect controlled for? There's so many factors to consider, because the thing with nutrition science is that it's important to understand it's shady AF, okay? Because there's so many industries that are involved in this, and then if they sponsor a particular study, then they actually get the same results that would actually favor the initial hypothesis that they would want to prove, right? So it's important to first and foremost make sure that it's an RCT, right? A randomized clinical trial. Second, if it's a systematic review, which actually analyzes a bunch of papers, that's even amazing. And then if it's a meta-analysis study, which is like analyzing a bunch of studies and actually coming out with an average based on those studies as well, the more strength of the evidence that is circled around a systematic review or a meta-analysis study, the more robust the conclusions of that study are, okay? Because the thing with nutrition science is you can have two completely opposing views. For example, you can have research that supports a vegan diet, you can have research that supports a carnivore diet, and then people are arguing with each other without actually looking deep into the context, okay? So when it comes to like what is the optimal human diet, understand that we have the Messiah tribe in Africa. They eat largely a protein-based diet. We have the Inuit people, the Eskimos, they eat largely a fat-based diet. We have the Native Americans that eat largely a carb-based diet, okay? They all do not experience chronic disease in their societies. So really what we have to watch out for are the foods that everyone can agree on are not doing our body temple any good, right? These foods are sugars, these are refined grains, and any processed foods really, and vegetable oils, which cause inflammation in our body, okay? So refined sugars, refined grains, vegetable oils, which are all, by the way, allowed on a vegan diet, right? Because if you can go on like a grain diet, that's pretty much a vegan diet, but that is not doing your biochemistry any good, okay? So when it comes to optimizing your nutrition, if you just let go of foods that everyone agrees on are not good, you will be better off than 90% of the people that are engaged in that standard American diet, and that is what ended up causing chronic disease, okay? And chronic disease is not present in a lot of the areas of the world where the Western American diet has not come into play, okay? So important to consider that as well. And then the most important principle of nutrition really is about bio-individuality, okay? What works for you might not work for me. What works for me might not work for someone else. It's important to always experiment and see what foods suit you and which foods do not, okay? Because any two humans have about 99% of the same human DNA, but we have less than 5% of the same microbial DNA. And as I have spoken of previously, we are actually more microbial than we are human, okay? For every one human cell we have 1.3 microbial cells. And in terms of gene expression, we express like more than, I think it's like at best we're like 1% human in terms of gene expression, because our microbial DNA expresses like 2 million genes, and then our human DNA expresses like 20 to 24,000 genes. Okay, so our microbiome, which is the microorganisms living in our gut, really determine whether a particular food is healthy for us or not. So a resource I can recommend over there is an app called Viome. Go to viome.com, viome.com, and you send over a stool sample, and they will tell you what foods are best suited for you based on your current microbiome. Okay, I had that test done as well. If you want me to share my findings, let me know in the comments below. I can make another video on that. Okay, now when it comes to plant foods, right, after considering all this information, you're like, yo, I still intend on being on a pure vegan diet. Okay, it's important first and foremost to keep an awareness on the anti-nutrients within plant foods. Okay, there's stuff like lectins, there's stuff like oxalates, which are really rich in dark leafy green vegetables as well. That is what ended up causing issues in my gut, forming oxalate crystals, which end up causing excruciating pain, to say the least. So if you do intend on going on a vegan diet, make sure to consider, like, first and foremost, like the digestibility. If a particular vegetable is full packed of nutrients but it's not being metabolized effectively by your microbiome, then it's pretty much going to cause inflammation, and inflammation is at the root cause of all chronic disease. Okay, and then secondly, it's like, okay, if it's nutrition dense, is it being metabolized? All right, great. Now it's important to consider the micronutrients, right, the vitamins and minerals, because like if you are going vegan, then it's important to consider supplementing with vitamin B12, because that's something that we only get from animal products as well. And also consider like working with a nutritionist to make sure that you are getting all the amino acids from all the proteins, right? Because if you are consuming only one source of protein from plants, then that is not going to be a complete amino acid, which is going to compromise your ability to gain muscle and stuff like that. Okay, so this is definitely, like, if this is a path that you choose to go down, definitely keep an awareness of your fat intake, like saturated fat, which is basically how our brain is formed. Like, it forms a cell membrane around every single one of our cells is made of fat as well, and saturated fat can be an issue on a vegan diet as well. Okay, but at the end of the day, understand that it comes down to bio individuality. What works for you might not work for someone else. Having an awareness of what foods suit you, what don't. Like, if you are on a vegan diet and it's not suiting you, then perhaps that is a point for you to get a deeper awareness on. Okay, because at the end of the day, like I said, this is not a matter of morality. If you understand the bigger picture, if you are caught up with the dogma, then I mean, at that point, just do what you want. But like, getting an awareness of what you're trying to do and what works, what doesn't work, and really at the end of the day, understanding, man, like, you know, in order for something to exist, something must try. That's the cycle of life, right? Cycle of life includes death, and you know, we're all one at the end of the day. And another final point over here that I forgot to mention is, like Dr. Baxter mentioned, that, you know, if you can actually begin to bless your food, then that can neutralize the effect as well, and it seems to take its spot, right? So that's something I've been implementing recently, just blessing my food, thinking about the animal, thinking about the plant, whatever it is that I intend on putting inside my body, like blessing it for, you know, giving its life for me to get my life. And that apparently has a positive impact and neutralizing impact in that regard. Okay, so just something I want to share, because I know that this is a trend, increasing trend in the spiritual community especially. So it's important to have an awareness of the big picture and not get caught up in the dogma, and see what works for you and what doesn't. Okay, because I know a lot of people who are vegan, they get very angry, and that's probably because they're lacking a certain amount of nutrients in their diet, and you know, it can be a lot of factors. But at the end of the day, the question is, if you objectively knew that eating animal products was better for your performance than not, would you eat them? And if your answer to that is no, then of course go down the vegan path, but make sure that you are optimizing your vitamins, your minerals, your digestibility as well. And if the answer is yes, then consider the bigger picture as well. Okay, so with that, I conclude this video, and I will leave you in the peace and power of the one infinite creator, and I will catch you in the next one.